There she is.
Hi. Hello.
You don't have. Hi, Pooya. How are you?
Hi.
And now Morgan. Oh,
Hello.
hello, ladies.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Yay, it worked. Oh my
We
God.
did
And
it.
you both look fabulous as well.
Well, this lovely lady, I've never seen her without her face on. I've got no face on. That's why I just put on a scarf so it looks like I put myself together.
Well, you look fantastic.
Life
You don't
hack.
need good. You don't need a
Thank you.
You're welcome. I love this. I haven't actually done this with 4 people, and it really feels like a Brady Bunch moment. And I'm just gonna call it. I'm really enjoying it.
I like this too.
All right, friends. I know exactly like It's great.
I want to see this sitcom.
I can see it too.
Please, yes, absolutely.
Mhm. How are you both doing today?
Great. I'm waiting for this beauty a second. I'm like, see, this is when people are too polite. Like, no, you, El Morgan, first.
No, you.
I'm great. I am still on a high from still not well, I'm 2 things. So one thing is I'm still on a high from a really great conversation last night that happened with a couple people that just something felt very special about it. It feels like there were people reached that might not have been reached before in many ways. And I think that's always really beautiful when people can be more, when people can be sort of carefully brought into the fold a bit more with the trans and non-binary communities, people who wouldn't have been before. So that was really great. And I'm still a little bit jet lagged. So I didn't go to sleep last night until like 5 a.m. almost, which is completely like, I was already jet lagged and it made it get like even worse because it's as if my body stayed up until 10 a.m. So yeah, so I'm doing really good because I'm here with you all now, but but I'm like a little bit of a zombie.
Well, now I'm even more impressed that you look as you're shining, and it's because you're sleep deprived.
I have good light. It's all about light.
It's all about the light and the scarf, right?
This is the trans edition of The View. All you need to do, the right light and the right scarf, and everybody,
I would watch that show.
Oh my God.
I would watch that version.
Today also CDC, they put out like their new memo that if you're fully vaccinated, now you don't need to wear a mask outside or inside, which also as an actor moving forward and, doing equity and SAG projects, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, let it be, let it be, let it be. Please let it, like, they're like, well, you don't know how it's going to go. I'm like, I'm going forward with the intention that everybody knows what they're talking about. And when they put out a memo, it's not going to be one of those, but, and hoping because we need to get back to work.
Yes.
We need to get back.
Right.
Yes. I mean, not that I don't love, it's like sticking the nasal swabs every time I need to be on set, but like being able to be there with each other together.
There's just nothing like it, right? And this is breaking news. Like this just came out.
Yeah.
I saw the article. It was like literally 15 minutes ago.
Yeah. I'm still kind of in shock.
I feel like I'm still going to wear my mask
with me. I still have my mask with me though, just in case.
I
feel like
trust the
it's gonna
CDC
take me a minute to feel comfortable with it. Like I'm fully vaccinated. My house is all fully vaccinated, but I'm still just like just on the off chance, like I don't feel safe not wearing it yet. So
yeah, it's like baby steps.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a few months because I mean, if you think about it, like we went through all of 2020. No unified consensus as to what needs to be done if the virus is even real. Like there's still people who are still there, so they can be where they are. And then there are people who don't trust the vaccine, but as the numbers are going up of people who are being vaccinated, and you see we're still kind of like in the guinea pig phase, and I completely acknowledge that, but not so much the guinea pig phase as to whether the vaccine works, is how well does it work? Does it work against virus variation A or B or C and all of that? Can you still, and this is like what we're finding out. So I think probably we're now in May. I think by late June, July, we will just have more information.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As you know, people get together and all of that. So I'm just keeping fingers crossed that Broadway can open in September.
It's like, and we live in New York City. So it's like we live in a space where so many people are coming into our area. It's like if it was just New Yorkers, I feel a little bit more safe. But because there are people coming in from everywhere who have varying feelings about vaccinations or even just the disease at all, it's like, you know, it's not something that we kind of, we have to take it easy.
Hi, Jamie. Jamie's
Jamie.
in the chat. Jamie was part of organizing that that discussion that you had last night, which was great. Inviting, what is the term that we've used before, Kayla? Like inviting people in or welcoming them in instead of you know pushing them away, calling people in. You know, that was a calling in conversation through a white cis woman who was using her platform to pass the mic. So amazing what they're doing over there at March for Broadway.
Yeah. I had a chat today with Sierra Bodges and Ryan Haddad. Yeah. And I got to catch like little pieces of it and it looked like it was like wonderful. It's just, to me, it's just, I feel like all of this is really about bridge building. Yeah. And like people have different variations of what they think will make things move forward. But I feel like the more we are bound together walking, like the farther we'll get faster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the reality of it is, you know, as a writer and advocate, and Elle Morgan and I have talked about this, we don't live on an island. We can't just preach to ourselves. And you know, some of my friends and some of my younger, more vibrant friends in the community, sometimes they may look at me as like I look at the business point of it, but we're in show business. Right. We need audiences, we need producers, we need venues. So if you're just doing something that's only going to address a portion of the entire community, that's great. But, you know, when we became actors, when we became performers or directors or whatever, our ambition wasn't just to perform for 20 people. That's not to say that performing for 20 people is not wonderful and amazing. And I have performed for even less than 20 people. But the goal is to be able to perform on a larger scale, do more varied stories, bring in more varied performers, be able to share our stories with other people's stories and have larger audiences be able to see it and be changed by it, and be inspired by it. And that's what I always say. I'm like, I'm nauseatingly pragmatic. But I always say that I would like our stories to be on a stage where people who are not necessarily part of our community can see it, can be changed by it, can feel that they also have a right to see it and to be changed by it. Is that true about every story? No. No story is going to talk to everybody. It's not going to address every issue. And that's one of the things about representation. Like, you can't have a monolithic representation of one entire community and say, well, now the community is being represented because this one person is there.
Right.
Yeah. Or the story, whether it happens to be trans or women's story or people of color or immigrant. Even Elle Morgan and I have talked, when we say people of color, we say people of color and we think that encompasses every person who's not white. But that's not true. That's not true. The story of an immigrant is different from a Black woman from Louisiana. Absolutely. And their experiences. Because while what they have received from the status quo may be similar, their personal experiences, the baggage that they bring to it, is different. I'm a Middle Eastern trans woman. And, you know, Elle Morgan and Elle Morgan, I keep bringing you in here because you and I talk about these things. When the conversation goes about people of color, I always go and listen. But a lot of the times, I feel that does not represent my story. It doesn't, I don't feel scorn, nor do I feel that somebody's doing it on purpose. But I feel like this is one of the steps that we're taking. And I also see it in casting, whether it happens to be theater or film or television, and maybe we can address that they're in different places regarding inclusivity and representation. But as a Middle Eastern person, my opportunity to be able to portray a queer person of Manasa background, or even of MENA background, because then there's also Anish, who is a South Asian trans woman. We don't have a whole lot of opportunities except for those instances that, let's say, National Queer Theater or the New York Theater Rep, or in my case, I went to South Coast Repertory to do things. It's when a specific Middle Eastern artist has written something that has a specific North African or Middle Eastern or South Asian character, and we get to be in that, because when the like when the wholesale term of people of color is thrown out, usually it has implications of what it is that is meant by it.
Yeah. And the specificity too, right? Are people sometimes afraid to be specific, and they'll say, like, for example, people of color when they mean a Black woman, and people are just afraid to say Black woman.
Yeah.
I feel that way, but Elma, I mean, what is your experience of that?
I agree. I think that people often, I feel like when people were saying people of color, it was sort of geared towards Black and Latin people in particular, which is also, I think, part of the reason for this term, which I'm not the biggest fan of the term, but I do think that, like, BIPOC, like the reason for bringing that BIPOC term out was specifically to sort of pull out that Black, Indigenous, and then people of color. But, like, the reality is now people are using it the same way. People are saying BIPOC, but only really meaning Black or Latin or whatever sort of subset of group or whatever group that they're trying to talk about. And it's tricky because there is something to be said about people having to take the time to say the group that they're actually speaking about. That gives that group that much more visibility and that much more sort of agency in conversations. Because we very rarely hear people say Asian when they're talking about, when people are talking about Asian groups, they typically say Asian. They don't say BIPOC.
Right.
I think it's very interesting because Asian people are included under that umbrella. But when people want to speak about Southeast Asian or Asian folks, they say Southeast Asian, they say Asian. So I think it's like we need to maybe, I'm not sure who sort of approved this language and suddenly made it this is the term. But it's something I would rather people just say what they mean. Now, if I say BIPOC, I am actually meaning all of those groups. But even for me, it's like, well, maybe I should stop being lazy then and actually start to, like, mention the groups I'm speaking about. I think there's a fear of leaving people out in that conversation, though, that comes up, which I totally understand.
It's so tricky, right? And I saw something recently where somebody who was a First Nations person was saying, don't say BIPOC if you don't have Indigenous peoples here.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, that's food for thought. Right. And so
and how would we know, though, is the thing.
That's true, too. That's true, too. But
well,
identity,
I was getting into a conversation the other day of, like, I think this speaks to a need, like you were mentioning earlier, Elle Morgan, about building bridges. And we have to incrementally build these communication bridges of making it okay. Be specific, say who you're talking about, go ahead and venture forward, maybe messing up, but, like, ask people what they would like to be called or referred to as, or how they identify. Ask people what they need, ask people what they want, and then move forward. But right now, I think while a term like BIPOC can be helpful because it allows you to, address the issue without being super specific, without putting your foot in your mouth at all, it's not super helpful with, It is helpful to be specific and say exactly what it is you're talking about. And that's how those little bridges start to be built between people. It's just a little more in that pocket of, I see you, we know we're on the exact same page. And I think that people just need to get past the fear of that. And the more that we walk that bridge, and the more that we use it, and the more that we build it, and the more that we add those bricks, then it will start to feel more and more comfortable. But for right now, I think BIPOC is a very safe and comfy term that doesn't imply any risk.
And it also, as someone mentions in the comments, I do think one of the pros to the term is that it does include people who come from a variety of different backgrounds in one person. So if someone's multicultural, then and might not actually might feel uncomfortable identifying fully as one thing or the other. It is encompassing of that group too. So perhaps I need to like just shut my lip and just use the term.
I think both things can be true. Yeah. I think both things can be true at the exact same time, and that it all just needs to be taken with a grain of salt. You know?
Sure.
And I think that the default is if somebody tells you how they want to be referred to, whether that is cultural identity or pronouns, just do it.
Listen,
it's super easy. Yeah.
And I feel part of it is also when we were talking about the fear of being wrong. It's kind of like having to put yourself in a place that you're vulnerable, which means that somebody can correct you, somebody can guide you. And a lot of people don't like that. Whether it happens to be that's like, I want to show the world that I'm really hip and I'm really where they need to be. And I know everything that there is. But one of the things we always talk about is nobody knows everything. Nobody knows everything. I mean, I come from a generation that being transgender was referred to as transsexual. I know people who still kind of like, adhere to that old term, but that has changed. There was a time that I didn't know the term non-binary. Me as a trans person and advocate, I was like, I don't know it. But at that time I realized that what I can say, which would be truthful and also inclusive, I'm like, well, I may not know it. That does not mean that it's not there, that it's not valid, because I can acknowledge that there is much I do not know. So I can look for people who do say that they know. When a non-binary person tells me, this is how I like to be addressed, this is who I am, I'm not going to then say, well, this is what a non-binary person is, as opposed to, I'm not a non-binary person. Here is a non-binary person, and they can educate you the way that you need to be educated.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things. What's the quote? There's a quote. I think it's from Yentl from Piece of Sky, where she says, the more I live, the more I realize, the less I know. And I love it, because it's like the longer you live, the more I realize I don't know anything. There's so much to learn, and there always will be.
Yeah. We didn't officially introduce what we're doing here because we just went into it, which was so beautiful and natural. But just in case people, that was so great. Just in case people don't know what we're doing here, Kalyn, would you like to orient them?
Just in case we got right off on a really ball rolling there, But so this is Brain Lab. Thank you for everyone who is joining and has already been listening in on this conversation. We have two incredible guests with us today, L. Morgan Lee and Pooya Mohseni. Is that correct? How to pronounce it?
Yeah. Yes.
Amazing. And we're super grateful that you guys are joining us today to start to share with us in our community your experiences, your stories with trans representation or lack thereof, your experience on Broadway, film, TV, just in the theatrical world in general. But we are using this platform today to we're starting to use our platform now more and more to have more of these dialogues, and we fully intend to continue having these conversations and bringing on as many voices as possible. So I do want to say that Alisa and I, because she's over here for me, we're 100% open to any and all feedback. We've already received some really fantastic feedback. Again, on the note to segue right off of, we don't know what we don't know. So we are fully open and eager to learn more of the things that we don't know. So we're open to any and all feedback that anyone in our audience, anyone participating has about who you would like to hear from, what you would like to hear more of, something that we've missed. Like, that's why we're here. That's 1000% why we're here. Before we really get started, we do want to just say thank you to everyone who's already contributing in the chat. We have Miss Shoshana in the chat who is moderating for us. And she's going to be looking at all of your questions and kind of pinning things that rise to the top and maybe want to be addressed or answered. But we do ask that everyone proceed forward with the utmost respect, the utmost compassion, and your most active listening. We are centering our the trans experience in this conversation, and their safety is at the top of our priority list. So as with our last conversation that we had, it's a one and done, one strike, you're out. So please do not bring any of that negative juju into this room, because we don't need it. But while I've introduced your names and we've already heard you speak so eloquently, I'd love to have you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you're from and whatever you care to share. So Elle Morgan, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Elle Morgan Lee, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm an actress. I guess what to say about myself, it's always awkward. I guess something fun is I just got back from London playing Lily Alba in a musical adaptation of The Danish Girl. And I am so excited about what is possible for that project. Yeah, so I'm here and I'm excited to be a part of this chat.
Rock on, sister.
Yes.
Yes. Pooya?
Hi, I'm Pooya Mohseni. I'm an Iranian-American actor, writer, and trans advocate. I say actor because I also believe we don't say lawyer, lawyeress. But again, that's like my personal choice. That's how I like to self-identify. I would never venture to talk about Broadway the way this lovely lady right next to me can, because she is just, you know, heads and shoulder above me. And I mean, this is an Obie Award winner. But when it comes to film and television, I've done a little more than this lovely lady has. And we can talk about representation of trans people in general in our... Because while they may be different worlds, they all suffer from the same symptoms.
That's true.
So true.
That's very true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then thank you guys. I'm so grateful that you guys are here. Thank you for taking time out of your crazy schedules and giving us and offering your energy and offering your presence to us. It really means a lot. It does not go taken for granted, I promise you. I'm Kalyn. I'm an actor, singer, dancer, poet, fitness weirdo. Auntie. I'm an aunt. That's my biggest identifier. And then Alisa, I'm just like passing it.
I'm Dr. Alisa Hurwitz. I'm a clinical psychologist, and in the theater community, I'm Dr. Drama. I bring that psychology knowledge to talk about theater, and also very proudly am part of the gender clinic, adolescent gender clinic at Dartmouth, serving trans teens in this area, and I'm so happy to be here. Yeah. So let's continue that discussion, which is so awesome. And by the way, like, shout out to the Danish Girl creative team for actually casting a trans woman as a trans woman.
And a Black trans woman.
Yes.
Lily Alba. Like,
yes.
While we were over there, it's one of those things where as we've been working on the project, I've been a little bit like, I'm so used to this business and sort of how new projects come into play that I just kept like, I keep waiting for like the rug to be pulled from under me about all of this. And so in many ways it took going to London and actually like being with the team in a room and like actually hearing them speak like in front of me as opposed to on a screen, to start to feel more like, no, they're serious. Like they are really like committed to making this project happen this way. And like, I could not feel more like honored and like privileged to like get a chance to tell her story, because I think that because in many ways I'm like an example of like the complete like the complete opposite of what people are expecting to have seen with this sort of a story. And I think that like it makes such a beautiful statement of like the potential of where theater can go and where stories that are being told can go if people would just sort of get out of the way of them and see the people that truly take the time to see the people that they are considering for these roles. I think that like it would open the playing field to so many more options, which would ultimately help so many more people be seen. And at the end of the day, it's like, that's all everyone really wants, is just to be seen. And that's whether you're trans, non-binary, gender, it doesn't matter. That's whatever intersection you inhabit. People just want to feel like people are acknowledging their space and seeing them. So I I'm so blown away by the team, and like I'm so in love with them. I'm like, just take me back to London already.
This is when talent wins over type. Your talent, they saw that as more important as, oh, she's not the right type for this role.
Yeah. Well, because also, what is the type? It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, we need to, it's that actual conversation about type that even needs to be exploded, because the conversations about type are so limiting to people. We play, in our lives every day, we play all parts. I'm a leading lady in my life. To my best friend, I'm a supporting lead. To it's like you play all of these parts every day. Who are the powers that be that get to sort of come down from on high and tell you shouldn't be playing because you're not a size 2 and 5'2"? How dare you be loved in a show? It's like I'm loved every day. Like I'm loved by people. So like people should show you that you are like, well, I mean, look, I'm single, y'all. So like, I'm not loved like that. Somebody like,
guys, you heard it.
DMs are open.
But like truly, it's like people are shown love every day who don't fit the the waist size or the hip size, and also when it's involving women, like, where is this coming from? This is coming from men. This is coming from the patriarchy telling us that we have to be a certain size and a certain look to be attractive. It's like it's such a longer conversation, and now I'm going to be quiet.
No, it's a lot to unpack, and it's important to unpack.
Yes.
Well, and it's all
I'm going to add something to that.
And it just keeps on going. So
I'm going to add a little something to that. Well, actually, two things. And I've said this before in town halls that we've had, is it becomes even worse when your color or your gender identity is considered a type, which is, it's like, and I've actually said that. It's like someone's ethnicity is not their type. So you can't say trans character as though it's like that in itself implies something, because it does not. You see two trans women side by side, we may be friends and we love each other. We're not the same person. We don't have the same experiences. We don't have the same essence. But on top of that, you then add, and this is considerably more tangible for women, age. Oh, age. This is why all the women who are supposed to be in their 40s are played by people who are in their 20s, and all the people who are in their 60s are played by people in their 40s. And then we wonder, why is it that all of these people look so much younger than real life? Because they're 20 years younger than they should be.
Right. Yep.
I had an experience like that not too long ago, and I was like, oh, this character is supposed to be this and this and in their 30s, and then the person who cast, I'm like, that person is supposed to be in their mid-30s? Okay.
Duly noted.
You're like, she just graduated from college.
It's like, I'm like, really? It could be like her younger sister.
I also think about, you were talking to Morgan about like kind of the disbelief, and it became more real when you were there sitting physically in the room with the creative team. And I think the creative teams have amends to make because they've done wrong by so many communities, and so amends is an action word, right? And so it wasn't until they were actually doing the creative work with you in the room that they were doing the work.
Sure.
Right?
How else can you trust? I would say with this team, they are an exception. Because they've been doing the work like the entire time. From day one, they were doing the work. Like, it's one of those spaces where both of these writers are cis. They're both, I will say, they are both under 30. So there is a sort of a different mental sensibility, I think, about how things go. And so they knew going in that if they were going to tell this story, that they wanted to do it right. And so they're, even aside from the fact that the actors in the cast are a mix of genders and everything else, they had like 3 or 4 different consultants who were trans in the space.
There you go.
Wow.
Constantly sort of weighing in and doing the work to tell them, no, but not that, because that will imply this and we don't need that anymore. Like, it's a very like collaborative process with really using the consultants to help them guide the ship. So like, I just kept thinking the whole time, I'm like, this is like, it's mind blowing, because this is how it should be done. If you are a cis writer looking to tell a story that centers trans people, I mean, first thing you need to do is check and see if there are trans people that you can bring onto the writing team. But if that is not the case, to fill the room with trans people in assisting you who are not acting in the piece is fantastic.
It's so possible. And it's possible and it's easy. And I think that's such an amazing example to hear, like such a hopeful situation. And I agree with you. I'm kind of like the fact that we're shocked by it, like that there's disbelief of, oh my God, that, really? That needs to change. Like it should not be the surprise.
And I actually brought up the fact that I was like, I just want to check in because we haven't really discussed this at all. And I know this is, this is the Danish girl. So I'm curious about, I'm a Black woman. So like, how is that playing in this game when we're talking about all these different locations and things going? And like, the response was, yeah, well, I mean, we know that. We actually it was not really a factor in terms of how we were looking at things. But sure, if that's something that we want to talk about throughout, we can talk about it. But that was not a big thing in our head through this. We saw you and we wanted you. And it's just like the things that you're hearing. It's like, well, this is how theater can be. This is how film and TV can be when people take the time to just see the person in front of them. Like, and it doesn't take, I think it takes more effort to put preconceptions on people and then have them wait or not, or if they can meet it or not. It's like, if you just take the time to see them, you're going to get so much more.
Can you ladies talk about the kind of unpacking the difference between, they wanted you for that role, or Pooya, you might have hopefully have had that experience, or you've also created your own art to perform in and produce. How is that different than, because people get confused about this, I think, than a cisgender person playing a role that's trans and non-binary, right? In the film, The Danish Girl, the character was played by a cisgender male, right? How is that different? Like, if they just wanted that actor for the role, how is that different in the storytelling than wanting you for the role as a trans woman?
So Eddie Redmayne, who is a fantastic actor, had to act trans, is the first thing. Yeah. It is very different than just being trans. There are things that a cis person looking at the script is going to go, okay, great. So, she does this and she does this and she walks here. Whereas when I look at the script, I'm immediately like, oh, that's part of me and that's part of me. And it's like, I don't have to think twice about what's going to come out because I already get it. It's like, it's lived already. And the journey that she takes is lived already. Whether or not it is exactly my journey, I have a natural place that I can attach to, that I don't have to do a whole lot of thinking about. How does it feel how does it feel the first time you look in the mirror and start to see yourself a little bit more realized? How does that feel? It's not this sort of game of, well, this is what I think it would be. It's like, no, I got it. Like, I know exactly what it is and how that feels. And cis people can't act that because they don't know it. If we're in a space full of people and she's the only trans person in this space, she's the only trans woman in this space, when she goes to the Danish ball for the first time, and it's the first night that she has a gown on and is looking around the ballroom for the very first time, a cis man is going to be acting through that. But trans people experience being that only person in the room all the time. We're more used to it than not in many instances. So again, it's like, I don't have to act that. I already get that. I just need to focus on the scene and what else is in the scene. And Pooya, maybe you can speak to this, like because people also get confused about this, that well, if only people who are transgender can play a character who's transgender, then can only cisgender people play a character as cisgender. But cisgender, being cisgender is the predominant culture, and that's what we see represented and in art, the performing arts, almost 100% of the time. So that's an experience that's known to everybody, right? Would you say that's the distinction?
I'm actually going to quote an actor who I have great respect for, a cisgender man. He's been in many things, but specifically about a role he played on one of the seasons of American Horror Story. I don't remember his first name, but the Mr. O'Hara, that
Dennis.
in the
Dennis O'Hare.
Dennis O'Hara, that he played the character of Liz Taylor on the hotel season. And he was talking about, it's like how he came to play this trans character and how the evolution of the character was. And what he talked about, he said, yes, if you want to talk about acting, acting is acting and everybody can act. But if you're talking about a community that otherwise does not have jobs, because, and this is something that a casting director told me in a very loving way. I don't like the information that I was told, but it was told kind of like as an ally. Said, you do know that there are going to be producers or writers or directors who, while not knowing it, they're going to have a problem with you playing a cis character who's the love interest of another cis hetero character. And I can't deny that that is truth. That is truth. We have prejudices that we know, and then there are prejudices that are so deeply embedded that we don't even acknowledge it as prejudice. It's just the way it is. People will be uncomfortable. Now, you can't explain why people will be uncomfortable, but they'll be uncomfortable. And so I know that there are a lot of people out there that, because we're all out and vocal about who we are, they don't even think about us in terms of roles that are not trans. Now, I'm not saying everybody, so somebody's going to say, well, not everybody. I did not say everybody. I said there are a lot of people, the powers that be, the older people who, as El Morgan was saying, younger generation and older generation have a very different idea about trans representation, whether how they feel about it or how valid and important they think it is or it's not. So there are a lot of people who have the power who, even when they think, okay, we're going to have a trans character, but we're going to have a trans character who has no romantic relationship with any other character, because while we feel comfortable enough for this character to be there, but we don't want to make people uncomfortable, because then they have to think about, well, is this character gay or not?
Their children might see this.
Yeah. So there are people who already feel that way, and I know that there are probably many doors by those people that would be closed in my face. I acknowledge it. I don't accept it. I don't think it's right, but it's there. So if that's the case, and we, for the most part, are not allowed to play anything outside our community, then when our own right to play our own characters is also taken away from us, then what are we supposed to do? And it comes down to livelihood. And somebody could say, well, it's survival of the fittest. I'm like, well, we have guidelines, we have initiatives to make sure that it's not law of the jungle, that everybody gets a fair shake. I'm not saying that they should suddenly open the door and everybody should come in, but at least let our talents speak. This beautiful, amazing woman next to me, virtually, so she can sing the pants off anybody. She can act. She's talented. But as she would probably tell you even better than me, the first thing that people know, many people, not everybody, is that she's a trans actress. Not an actress who happens to be trans, but a trans actress. And that is a huge distinction. Because I'm an actor who also happens to be trans. Yes, I'm more than happy to play great trans characters who are fully fleshed out, who are not there just to it's like move along the plot point of the cis characters, or be there as some sort of a non-attached, non-central oracle that is just there to guide the story along, because God forbid we would have a relation. So if I know that, when somebody actually looks at me as just an actor, which has happened to me a few instances, and I always bring up the example of me being a judge on Law & Order, the casting director knew I was trans. The production people knew I was trans, because God knows I have a big mouth and everybody. And here I went for this role who had no gender descriptive, no age, no ethnicity. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to get it. But they like the quality I brought. And that was one of those instances that we like the quality of this person, regardless of where they come from, regardless of how old they are, regardless of their gender identity. I also know that most casting offices, that's not how they work. That is not, unfortunately, how they were. But that's why we have these conversations. That's why we do the town halls. Because, and El Morgan can add to this or negate it if she wants, my qualities are not limited to the fact that I'm an Iranian American woman or that I'm a trans person. I'm also a New Yorker. I'm also a community mom. I'm also somebody's daughter. I was also somebody's wife. And those are all the qualities that have very little to do with either of those. And in this business, you know, yes, we're all moving towards a day that everybody can play everything, but we're not even close.
No.
So at the very least, we should have the opportunity to play the few good roles that are written for people in our own community.
And even then, there are often times when you walk into a room for that role that is written as trans, and then you're told that you're not really trans enough to them. They're expecting something very different than you.
Wow.
You're not. No, you're not trans to us. You don't look like a trans person to us.
Wow, that's a
What
lot
does
to
that
unpack.
mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
To the audience, that basically means you don't look like my perception of what a trans person looks like and sounds like, because I want my audience to know and be able to point at that other person so they won't suddenly feel uncomfortable by being confused.
You know, you were talking before about, you know, El Morgan, like referencing that when people watch shows or go to shows, take their families to shows, that, you know, heaven forbid that the kids see, you know, kids shouldn't see. And, you know, as a psychologist and as a mom, you know, that's also one of my my identities, that that I advocate and think it's so important to have conversations about not only attraction, you know, it doesn't have to be sexual, but also gender identity from a young age. Right? Because it shouldn't only be people who are trans and non-binary, genderqueer, who question and explore their gender identity and gender expression. It should be all of us. And then that helps, I think. So I have 6 and 8-year-old, and we talk about it. You know, because it comes up in art. We talk about it because we have books where it comes up. We talk about it because they know about my job at Dartmouth, and why that's important to me. I just encourage parents to not be afraid to talk about gender identity, because it's the first part of our identity that we know as young as before we're even really verbal and speaking full sentences. We know.
And even the conversation, that's one of the comments that actually like cuts me maybe the deepest out of all the conversations, because for me, I mean, maybe this is a lot to share. Well, we're with the doctor here. I was like, let me just lay on the couch.
How do you feel about that?
For me, one of my deepest dysphoric things is the fact that I know I will never be able to have children. And like, for me, my spirit and soul is like, I'm made to be a mom. Everything about sort of the way I express my love, and like, I'm literally made to be a mom. And like, the fact that I know I will never be able to be one in that way really cuts me deeply. So this idea that my very presence is somehow offensive or frightening or something that a child should be ashamed of, it's like, it hurts. Like, it's like one of those things where it's like, you don't even realize that your ignorance is not only hurting that person, but is also planting a seed in your child that they might hurt someone else later one day. And I don't think that that's what a good parent would ever want to do.
Right. And
that child hurting themselves.
Or that child feel exactly.
Right. And that goes back to, I think, what we were speaking about earlier, to circle back, that the conversations matter, the bridges matter. That I think, you know, the 80s, 90s, maybe even, you know, was a time where we were kind of acculturated to believe that we should not speak about things. There's so much that should remain unspoken. Don't talk about sexual orientation. Don't talk about gender. Don't talk about race. Don't talk about religion. Right? It's like all these things don't talk about. And I don't subscribe to that. And I think hopefully as a culture, we're moving through that to the other side, right? I even think about, that we were taught growing up, don't talk about race, don't see color, Well, of course we see color, don't talk about it. So I think people are having to move through their discomfort because that's what we believe. No, let's talk about, and especially as a psychologist, right? Talk about it. Don't hold it. Let's talk about it. And it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to trip up. It's also okay to Google and do some research.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's not okay is just realizing because you don't know something, it's not valid.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people believe that. I've come across people saying, well, that's not what I learned. I'm like, you know what? 40 years ago when I was a child, there were many things that are happening now that didn't happen at that time. Mm-hmm. And yet they happen. And they're right. And just because I didn't know it, it didn't mean that it's like, devil voodoo or something. My example I always say is like, think of it as a language. Yeah. I don't know a word of Chinese. Not a single word. So by that analogy, I would say, well, it's not a valid language. They're just talking in gibberish. And yet there are over 1 billion people who do. Mm-hmm. If you use that same analogy, it sounds stupid. Mm-hmm. Well, you shouldn't talk about it. Or they will learn. I'm like, well, I didn't learn not to be trans from all the not trans people around me. So I can't imagine why somebody would learn from me how to be trans.
Right. Right. Somebody had a question earlier. What do you think about the inclusion of, I don't know if I'm saying this right, ALANA as an acronym? African, Latin American, Asian, Native American. We were talking before about BIPOC as a term. Have you heard of ALANA?
I've never heard of that term.
I've never heard that.
And I'm in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great, but it's also excluding some people.
I mean, that doesn't include you, right? Middle Eastern folks weren't in there. Yeah. Yeah.
It's also this weird categorization of ethnicity, because technically part of Middle East is in the Asian continent. Mm-hmm. But in America, when you say Asian, you're talking about something specific. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then also North Africa is technically part of the African continent. But people from North Africa look different than people from, Central Africa. And I'm not saying that I have the answer, but I think it's what we were talking about is this idea, well, this is not good enough. It's good, but it's not good enough. It can be better. Yes, in an ideal world, when you say people of color, you're not signaling, I'm going to say people of color, but what I really mean is, X and Y. But the day that when you say people of color, you mean everybody who's of color, which also doesn't really make sense because everybody's of color, of some color. I think the truth of it is the ideal, the utopic idea is that someday that's not something that we need to acknowledge other than our heritage and what that actually brings us, instead of categorizing and putting in the box. Like, this character has to be a person of color, i.e. Black, because I have written it in this stereotypical way that a Black person speaks. Because sometimes I get something that says person of color and I'm reading it, I'm like, this is so stereotypically a Black woman. Loud and sassy, and it has all the stereotypes. I'm like, I can do it, but even I'm not going to have respect for myself after I read this line, which belongs to some sitcom from like 1960s.
Look, yeah. and then I get those sides and I go, this is offensive. Who is this?
Right.
It's like, or we get those sides and go, well, this is not me, but I need to maybe speak to reps just to let them know that, like, I'd rather not do this lane of things. This is for some women who are really excited to be this way and who this fits who they are, and more power to that woman. But now this is another wall to have to break through because this is what's expected of all of us.
You said something I thought was really notable back in the conversation, talking about, communicating with reps and creative teams, that creative teams need to hire people to consult when it's not, when they're writing a character who's not, has a specific experience that's not their experience. And you said and that needs to not be the actor. Can you talk about why that's important?
Sure, because the actor's job is to act. The actor's job is not to have to also serve as a creative team member to educate the team in the writing and in the building of the piece. If that I believe if the actor, because the thing is, they're going to learn from you anyway if you're in the space. Like, just, I mean, as I would learn from anyone who I'm getting to know, you learn constantly. But it's when it becomes that sort of, you're hired as an actor, but you're also taking on the position of a consultant, that's a separate paycheck. And that's something else that someone else, that's a job that someone else could be doing. Or if that actor wants to do it and is okay with taking that labor on, then that's an extra bump in their pay that really should be put in there as well.
Hey,
does some consulting work as well, I think, too.
Yeah.
That sometimes also happens with Middle Eastern actors, whether it happens to be Farsi or Arabic, that, you know, an actor is brought and they've written them like, we want this to be authentic in whatever language. Now, whether or not the person actually has said that I'm a good translator or I can do this. But that's also, you know, it's like, it's a job. It's a separate job. It takes time, and not everybody can do it. And it's like, if they want to do it, then they should also hire that person to also do that. But it's not like an extension of the acting job,
right?
Like, it's like you know, an actor who also has to be the costume designer. Sure, you do that in small productions that they don't have a budget, but in a full production, you're not going to go on show with everything in your closet.
Right. Right. And pay people for their expertise.
And pay more than one people. Pay more than one person.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that single consultant that you hired will likely have blind spots. And like, it's nice to have like someone to bounce things off of so that they can both be working together in that process.
That's a good point.
Except for Elle Morgan and I, because we don't have any
don't have blind spots.
We see all. What a more general question I have for you both is just what attracted you to performing?
I'll go on this one first. I'm a child of war. I grew up in Iran during the 80s, and the world around me was very bleak. Food rations, food coupons, bombings, power outages. And the one thing that gave a little solace, you know, a respite, if you may, from the kind of like the gray, dark world was these movies that we got to see. Yes, now looking back, it's like it didn't have a great representation of anybody, really. There were movies from like 50s and 60s, so nobody was represented in a good way. But it just created something. It made us feel something. It made us escape. Different entertainment has different purposes, you know, so to think that everything should enrich your life, I don't know if everything does. Something makes you laugh, something makes you cry, something makes you fall in love or out of love and all of that stuff. I felt that magic. I felt my own connection and almost like deifying that concept that somebody through that screen is allowing me to escape my immediate moment. Now, as I've grown, my concept of what that means and what that should mean and the respect that I have for it has changed. But this idea that I can create something that either somebody there or somebody thousands of miles away and decades later can watch it, can be moved by it, can fall in love with something, can feel pain and joy, and maybe even learn something about themselves and become a little more of who they are, a better, fuller version of them. That is where my respect and my adoration for the craft comes from.
Lovely chat today.
Oh. Oh.
Did I freeze?
Do we that broke the internet, Pooya?
You broke the internet. Completely broke it. That was so beautiful.
Did I break the internet?
You did. All of your face. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I've got two. Everyone's back now.
I was like, and that's how we end this lovely chat. Because
that was too much for Instagram.
I sound so spoiled when I say mine. I'm like, what draw me to performing is that I've literally done it since I could make sound. my mom my mom says I was always dancing and singing in front of the television as a baby. So like it was sort of second nature. I got into nursery school and they had a talent show, and I was all of the teachers rallied together and I sang Karma Chameleon by Boy George. I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I was like 3 or 4. My mom came and saw the performance, and there I was, lipstick and makeup and doing the whole number.
That is your superhero origin story right there, I think.
Oh my God. Wait, I'm like, are there pictures of this?
Oh my God, no. I think my mother was
also, the Instagram's telling me we have a minute. I didn't realize it was going to cut us off with this, but it's telling me we have a minute and 1 second left.
I defer to Pooya's end of her statement, which was absolutely beautiful, is that I feel like I'm a creature of change, and ultimately that's the reason that I'm there doing this at all, is that I feel like I'm on this earth with the purpose to help to open minds.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you so much, ladies. We were blessed to have your expertise from your lived experience and your thoughts on being a human of the earth, and specifically your experience being trans women of color. We thank you so much for your sharing generously your time and expertise.
Yeah. And I'm glad that we ended on this little note of joy. And what it all means to you, because that's honestly what's important. That's what we want to raise to the top, was the joy. All right, we have 8